India's approach to space security? Well, I'm going to try and say something about this. The subject that has been given to me is Common Space Code for Asia. So when we talk about a space code, typically we are reminded of 11th of January 2007, and we all know what happened on that day. Shook us all out of our general slumber and happiness, so to speak. The furor and the outcry was enormous, a lot of chest thumping, a lot of debates and conferences such as this and media articles and so on and so forth, but not a single country actually used the mechanism of the Outer Space Treaty to lodge a complaint. It did not happen at that level, it did not happen bilaterally. But there was much activity in some forums. So the United Nations, the UNGA resolution on guidelines related to space debris mitigation, all of these events that have happened, that you see on the screen, have happened post the event. Conference on Disarmament in February 2008, a few days after the United States had brought down its satellite in a sort of a reactionary show of strength, if you like. They told us, of course, that it was because there was a tank that was leaking in their malfunctioning spy satellite 193, but WikiLeaks tells you a different story, and I don't think anybody was a threat if you were to believe WikiLeaks. And off CD, the European Commission put out their draft code of conduct on outer space activities, which was an extremely intrusive document, which is to be binding, which required disclosure about proposed launches in a manner that was not contemplated, is not contemplated in the registration agreement, and also supported by a lot of documentation to support the fact that they wanted this launch. Also did not have a caveat for national exigencies, and which included Article 51 of the UN Charter. Since then, the Code of Conduct, as we all know, has mutated into the International Code of Conduct for Outer Space Activities 2012, and in the case of the draft treaty, the PPWT, and the International Code of Conduct, we are now looking at new drafts 2014. So how did it come about? Where and how did this whole militarization happen? I believe when I was looking at the Outer Space Treaty, I realized that the treaty is drafted in such a way as to enable continued military use of space and therefore militarization of space. If you look at Article 4 of the Outer Space Treaty, which is the only article that deals with military, paragraph 1, which prohibits the placement of any nuclear weapons or WMD, is an exact reflection of Article 1 of the Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963. And paragraph 2 speaks of Moon to be exclusively for peaceful use, and prohibits the installation, fortification, testing, and so on and so forth. Any maneuver expressly is forbidden. So what this meant was that the use of military personnel for scientific research or any other peaceful purpose is not prohibited. Use of equipment and facility similarly is not prohibited, provided it's for peaceful exploration of the moon and celestial bodies. By implication, the development, testing and deployment of conventional weapons in the Earth's orbit and the development, testing and deployment of ground-based systems for satellite interception or any other, was also not prevented. And so in that happy sort of open, all countries were getting on with developing their technologies. And of course I'll have to say this, that there's nothing wrong with the military using the space, because that is what has led to the advancement of technology and innovation. So Article 4 is cited in support of military activities, as I just said, and citing the SS Lotus case, where the ICJ said that unless there was a rule existing, it could not be applied. So the conclusion was that unless there is a specific agreement prohibiting, it meant that it was allowed. And so we have many different arenas in the world where this has been shown. According to the Space Security Index, today space security is understood to mean the secure and sustainable access to and the use of outer space, including the moon and celestial bodies, and the freedom from space-based threats. And that space debris is the most critical threat in space, and sustainable use of space. Space situational awareness, therefore, is critical, as is active debris removal. But I would also add to this national ground assets and supporting links that are relevant to national space assets. That must also be included in what is meant by space security. It is not just, nothing happens in space in isolation. So now the question of common space code for Asia. Now look at the PPWT, sponsored by 7 countries, of which 5 are Asian countries. And this interesting development of last December, where UNGA Resolution 6932 received only 4 votes against it, on no first placement of weapons in outer space. This is an exact reflection of paragraph 1 of Article 4. So I think that this would be the first time that the Outer Space Treaty has been strengthened before an event has happened. Now, the United States, we know, was opposed to the EU code because they said that anything that directly or indirectly impugns in any manner its ability to defend itself and its allies and friends was not acceptable. It has also opposed the PPWT on the ground that it finds that the Outer Space Treaty is quite adequate, and therefore there is really nothing that requires another legally binding treaty. So this is where we are at. On the one side, you have a PPWT, the text of which actually goes well beyond paragraph 1 of Article 4, because it talks of a space weapon, does not restrict itself to nuclear or WMD, and a resolution that has strengthened at least the nuclear and the WMD part, and an international code which is a list of best practices. So the focus of both these documents is exactly the opposite of each other. PPWT pertains to placing in orbit. Now, international code focuses on preventing or trying its best to prevent ground to space satellite interception. So 2 sides of a coin, really, in a manner of speaking. So look at Asia now. It has the world's largest concentration of space powers. Regional space powers, space programs, major space powers. The Emirates are an emerging center, Israel of course, and the presence of the United States right across the Asia Pacific. So a lot of space powers here. So one way of saying is that whatever the Asian countries do is going to be the global code of conduct. But this is what really bothered us. Aggressive space capability and intentional in-orbit destruction. So I wonder whether another set of good practices, where in Boy Scout-like manner every Asian country says that they will not create any new debris in consequence of an aggressive, of an intercept satellite strike. It'll have to be, I mean, truly pacta sunt servanda in its purest form, if you like. It'll all have to be done in good faith. We'll all have to trust each other. Now, whether that is going to happen or not happen, I do not know. But it would be a little difficult to expect that. Ultimately, can a common code of conduct enhance national security of each Asian participant in the geopolitical context? That would be the key question. In any case, the point of the matter is that space doesn't recognize sovereignty. It does not recognize national jurisdiction. So even if all the Asian countries stop doing anything at all, is that to say that their adversaries who are non-Asian are similarly going to respond? So what is it that is happening now? The trend now appears to be for regional civil space cooperation as a means of enhancing security, as a means of getting countries invested in wanting to protect space and space use of space because as we've just been pointed out by my earlier speaker, that global commons is very important. You have your banking system, you have all kinds of different systems, and there are these satellites which are very important for these activities. I'm just taking a representative view. Dubai has progressed enormously. The UAE has progressed enormously. It has got strategic partnership with South Korea and Russia. Abu Dhabi has been tasked to writing the national space law, and there's a spaceport that is going to be built. They plan to have a unmanned space Mars mission in 2020. They want to develop their own launch capabilities. They want to cash in on space tourism. They have great plans. On the other side, you have the ASEAN, which has not been really so concerned about space up until the workshop they held in 2013. And this is something I found very interesting. There was a scholar who presented a paper, and this is what he said. He proposed that member states should develop indigenous space technology, reduce reliance on non-ASEAN spacefaring nations, and also eliminate dependency on non-state members by 2020. So you understand how they feel about very powerful space powers in Asia. So if they show sufficient solidarity and get on with the job, they will probably achieve what they wish to achieve, is to be self-sufficient in space as a group of countries. Which is not to say that some of those members are not participating in other regional groupings. Russia, well, they have bilaterals with India, China, Japan, South Korea. With Japan, it has become deepened. Recently, we've had the RIC, as they call it, Russia, India, China, and they also participate in UN programs. China has been the most active in creating its regional groupings, sphere of influence, if you like, or investment, or being invested in keeping space safe. You have the Asia Pacific Cooperation Organization, and they concentrate on space technology. A lot of development that is happening in Pakistan is in consequence of the development project of APSCO, Shanghai Cooperative Organization, where India has sought full membership and apparently has support from Russia and from China. The Beidou, which is the global navigation satellite system, proposes to reserve 60% for commercial use, and they plan to provide completely open technology and services to Asian neighbors. And today, with 16 out of the 33 satellites deployed, their army is no longer dependent on GPS for ground movement. Ground stations are being located in Pakistan to improve the service in that country. And of course, for the very first time, China and India have moved ahead with a dialogue, and we have a space cooperation pact. And I hope that we do progress along these lines. Japan has lifted its ban on the use of space for national defense, and they have added to their constellation of reconnaissance satellites. They also have, like we have, the Gagan, which is the geo-augmentation navigation satellite for aviation, civil aviation. They have the quasi-zenith, and they have a very robust national cyber security. They also have a regional grouping, the Asia Pacific Region for Space Agency Forum, which again focuses on space application and technology. But unlike the APSCO, it is open to government bodies and non-entities, so it's easier to attend the Japanese-led. India is regularly attends, as does China. India, up until now, has chosen to remain insular, and we have not done anything to engage in civil space cooperation despite our great progress in this field. Some might say that we've lost advantage to China, which in fact reality I imagine that is the case. But we have to understand civil space as a very important tool to create long-term linkages, and it remains as yet an untapped resource. We have, of course, having said that, India does actively participate in UN programs. So the SCAP program, where the importance of reliable georeference information and importance of early warning system and so on. We are, in fact, we have got spatial data and remote sensing satellites and a very good constellation of that. India also hosts a center for space science and technology education, which is again part of the UN program, and have students from very many different countries in the region. But now here's what it is. Since last year, we appear to have shifted gear, and we want to use space to deepen our relationship in our own region. Now, coming very soon, there is going to be, India is going to make a bid for the location of the global disaster forecasting hub to be in India. It is very important because we can then leverage the achievement of ISRO as well as the National Center for Ocean Information Service, and this is all part of the climate change and disaster management and so on system. Also, the Prime Minister has said that we must engage with SAARC, South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. It is important for India to recognize that most members of SAARC have very low exposure to international space cooperation and are interested in easier access to space technology and applications. There are only 4 countries in the SAARC region that own communication satellites: India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Afghanistan. Of this, Pakistan and Sri Lanka have been built and launched by China. Afghanistan has simply purchased an on-orbit satellite. The SASEC gives us the opportunity to engage deeper with Myanmar and down through to the ASEAN countries. So it is important, I believe, for India to think about security, space security, also in context to civil space cooperation. This is very important. Ultimately, what would space security be? How would India engage? I would imagine that we should accelerate and expand and lead civil space cooperation in all aspects of space sustainability in the region as well as globally. Collaboration and information sharing, now that is a very sensitive sort of area because there are national security issues that are involved, and I don't know whether it is easy, but we will have to do it. Active space debris removal mechanism, climate change, transparency and confidence building measures. So just a space conduct for Asia in terms of, a reflection of what the EU code is or the international, I don't know. I don't support that. I don't think there's much to it. We have to remember that whatever happens in outer space starts and ends on the Earth. So it's not just the space. Cooperation. Thank you.